Well, hello, welcome back to On Second Thought. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a parent and...
like parenting and technology, but...
Wait a second now. You mean that you have the right, as a parent, to take their phone at any time?
Maybe we should have our kids on and so they can say, this is true or false, what
Well...
we said. Or I guess all the people that listen could say, are your parents telling the truth?
Welcome back to On Second Thought. Thanks so much for being with us. This is Season 3, and in Season 3 we've been talking about parenting, kids.
I'm so ready for this season to be over.
Everybody wants to know how you do this.
I love parenting, but I'm tired of talking about it.
I have had some people say,
a little stressful.
We listen to your podcast, but we're not raising kids right now, or we don't have kids, so we're not listening this season. So that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. But maybe there are other people who've tuned in or downloaded or listened because they do have kids and they want to know answers to all of the most difficult questions. And I've told everyone you've got all the answers. So we're happy to have you on today.
Right.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have our kids on and so they can say, this is true or false, what
Well,
we said. Or I guess all the people that listen could say, are your parents telling the truth?
or we could threaten them and then bring them on, right? We could say, or bribe them. Maybe not threaten, right? Threaten's not the right word. We'll go get ice cream after if you say nice things about us, right?
They're going to say I'm funny. No, they won't.
They'll say you're hilarious,
they will not
right?
Say that.
I thought that had to wait till your funeral.
Yes, right. That's why I know they won't say it.
So we talked last time about kids in church, little kids in church. We highly recommend kids in church, but how do they behave and how do you correct and those sorts of things. And it is possible you can make it, whether they're toddlers, whether they're teenagers, and everything in between. And so today, Mrs. Perdue, where are we headed?
I think we're going to try and cover 2 topics today. One you want to talk about, and I just am not sure we should talk about, but I'm going with you on this, like parenting and technology, because I feel like we do not have this figured out. We are not perfect, and we probably, I know that we do it differently than a lot of people, and we can just give some overall general ideas.
So I'll give you one word to kind of summarize parenting your kids in a technological age, okay?
Yes.
That one word is yikes.
Yes.
My mom has looked at me and said, I'm so glad cell phones like this didn't exist when I was raising you. And I do want to talk about it, not because we've got all the answers, but we're kind of fellow strugglers on the journey. You know,
Right.
We're trying to figure it out as we go because I don't know. You're not going to turn to Nehemiah chapter 7 and be like, thou shalt not give your kids an iPhone, or thou shalt not have an iPad, or thou shalt not watch Netflix. So how do you navigate the whole, we live in a technological age. It's native to these kids, right? This is a part of their culture. For us, it wasn't native for us. We've adapted and learned. I have a love-hate relationship with my cell phone.
Yes.
Right? I really do. I think it's great for some things, and then there are other days I just want to throw it in the lake. So, and I would love to go back to the days of Andy Griffith and Barney Fife and Mayberry and not have to worry about any of that. But then I like other things that it provides and brings. And so I would say this: technology is a tool. Okay,
Yes.
Is it inherently evil, or is it inherently good? I think technology is a tool. There are certain aspects of technology that are inherently bad and wrong. But I think there are other parts of it that can be very helpful and right and can be used to promote righteousness and godliness and those sorts of things. So let's just say this. We have, with many other things in our lives... What am I about to say?
I don't know.
Why
really
are you
don't
laughing?
know. I
I'm
don't.
making you nervous.
Yeah.
I would say that we have, with many other things, kind of taken a middle-of-the-road approach on this. We are not totally cut off your kids from devices and from iPads and from television and from cell phones at a certain age and all of those sorts of things. So we are not the parents that
We're
say...
not anti-iPhoners.
Yeah, we're not the zero, is the way to go, but we're also... definitely not the parents that are like, oh, just let them figure it out. They'll learn.
They will learn.
They'll
learn
learn.
something.
Oh my gosh. So that's kind of where I was going. I thought you knew where I was headed because you were laughing. But in a lot of ways, we we try to strike what I think would be a middle ground, kind of this is how we approach this in an age of technology. How can you? So I want to teach our kids while they're still under our roof how to manage these things now, instead of, well, you're an adult now, here's your first iPhone, or here's your first Netflix account, or here's your first exposure to television, or here's your iPad or computer. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I've got all this freedom that I never had. And they typically, that doesn't go well either. So
what do we do?
A little bit of everything,
I feel like it's
right?
all morphed since in the past 10 years.
Well,
so
it has,
really
because it's very easy with your first child to set some pretty strict standards, and you can keep those standards pretty strong. But what happens is, if you have more than one child, the 13-year-old has access to a television or to a tablet, and the 5-year-old's like, well, they've got it, why can't I have it? Well, they didn't have it when they were 5, but it's really hard to say, well, you can't have it until you're 13. You know what I'm saying? We've been very careful, and one of the things I like about the iPhone in particular, and I'm sure this is true for Android users or whatever kind of cell phone you use, but one of the things that we've employed is we all are connected on a family plan. And with that family plan, we can control through passwords, through screen time protections, through content and privacy restrictions, and all of these sorts of things. You can control time limits, you can control websites, you can control all sorts of things that, hey, I specifically don't want them going to youtube.com, or I specifically don't want them going to this website. You can list those websites. And then it has age grading for, certain apps or certain videos or even music, clean or explicit, and those sorts of things. And so we were able to kind of adjust that. The problem with it is when they turn about 16, Apple treats them as an adult, right? And so we have to go into their phone and set those parental controls and those sorts of things. We can't, like right now with the little kids, I can set it from my phone. You can see it from your phone, and you can say, well, we're turning this off right now. With the bigger kids, you're like, give me your phone. Now, we have said before, at some point, if a kid tries hard enough or is smart enough, they're going to find a way around all this sort of stuff.
It goes back to your heart
issues. It goes back to the heart. And really, in the end, there is no filter for your heart that you can find on the iPhone, right? That's got to be your relationship with God. It's got to be the Holy Spirit. It's got to be your desire to grow in Christ and to flee from sin and sexual immorality and all these sorts of things. Because the reality is today, through technology, all the things, the nasty things that people had to go in the back alleys or drive to this place, or, it was a shame to buy this here and there, and you had to go look for it, it is delivered to you now. And it's not like you even have to go looking for it. You have to vigilantly, diligently push it away, right? You got to make sure it's not coming into your mind, your heart, your eyes. And that's visual, but it's also audit. Like, I am blown away by now, if we have Apple Music or something, blown away by the music and the language and the music and those sorts of things. And it was just that really wasn't even an option growing up, because it was on the radio and the FCC would control all that stuff. But now FCC doesn't control what's dropping in the albums and all the things they're saying and that sort of thing. So we've done a little bit of everything.
Right.
Our older kids do have cell phones. They have numbers. They're on a very expensive cell phone plan.
Yes. I mean, and if you find, we can talk about this later. If you find that your kid is not one of the trustworthy ones, then you take their phone, obviously. But
wait a second now. You mean that you have the right as a parent to take their phone at any time?
Well, I do. I don't know what other people think, but I do.
Wow.
And
that's a novel concept.
We've had times where, of course, we want to be able to get in touch with our kids. So we've, I'm telling you, parents, if you have friends that are parents and you have teenagers together, be a village together and figure out how to be smarter than the teenagers, because they are always researching how to be smarter than us. And if you think they're not, you're wrong. So we learned from somebody else that you can always make every app 1 minute.
Yep.
And that way they can still call me anytime, or they can text. And I'm sure that ever since we had to do that, it's probably changed some. So they still were able to have their phone in their hand, but they could do nothing with it except for texting.
Yeah, you could allow the phone to be used or texting to be used. And there are a lot of different ways. We've heard recently, somebody saying, well, you have access to a phone, but the only way you can use that phone is, in a certain situation, and I'm going to be able to see it. I'm going to be able to know what you're doing with it. And then I think we haven't done this because we haven't needed to, but if we had a kid that consistently abused their cell phone privileges, I think it would be wonderful just to get them a flip phone. Be like, here you go.
They're cool now.
Are they cool? Are flip phones cool?
Remember you used to text, you go up, 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 enter, down, down. Like you had to do 3 clicks for.
I didn't text until I had a BlackBerry. Do you remember the Blackberries?
I skipped the BlackBerry.
I got a BlackBerry.
I had a flip phone.
Oh, it was. I felt like the coolest dude ever with Blackberries. And then
that's just the basics of cell phones. Like, then you have to get into social media.
Good gracious.
Our kids. So we learned quickly, stupidly, I guess. So our overall rule at this point is you can have Instagram when you are in the 9th grade, and it must be on my phone for the first 6 months, and you can get my phone and look at your Instagram. After that, you can have it on your phone, but I still have to be logged in.
We still have all the passwords and everything.
I still have all the passwords. So I can pull up Instagram from my phone and look at anything on yours, and I can see all the DMs and all the things.
And if you were to ask me, am I glad Instagram exists and my kids have it, I'd say no. Like, I would prefer that not to be a part of our society, but it is. And kids, they're not on, like, our kids aren't asking for Facebook. They're not really even asking for Twitter or X, right? Instagram. Now, we've refused certain things, like we wouldn't do Snapchat.
Right. When you're 18, you can have Snapchat.
We wouldn't do TikTok, those sorts of things. And hopefully by the time you're 18 and it's like, hey, do I want Snapchat? You're mature enough to say, well, I want it, but I'll use it wisely, or no, I don't even think I need it. But one of the things now with Instagram DMs is there can be this vanish mode and that sort of thing. And so we want to make sure that we're not even allowing them to do that, because, why would Instagram want to put something like that in there? Right. Just so that you can delete things that you probably shouldn't say or probably shouldn't see or, probably shouldn't happen. And so
that's also like the private on your iPhone. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even know
we've been very careful with allowing cell phones. For a while, we would let our early teenagers have what we call a phone pod. And that's like it's an old, dilapidated iPhone or something that has no cell service whatsoever. But when they're on Wi-Fi, they can text us through iMessage or something like that.
Right.
And
I'm sure there are people that are way smarter than us that have this figured out. So we are open to tips on how to do it.
Do you remember that old show, like, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Yes.
So this is Are You Smarter Than a Teenager?
Yes.
But you have
always the game that you're playing.
You got to stay ahead. But the good news is, like, you don't have to know it all. You just got to stay like a step ahead of your kids on this.
But again, if your kid wants to do something wrong on their phone, they will do it.
And they'll figure out a way.
They will figure out a way, because there are plenty of hacks online. And you just have to pray the Holy Spirit would reveal what's done in darkness, will be brought to light.
Yeah.
And then you figure it out.
Well, and I've taught the parents.
We can't always stay smarter
I've taught the parents, like, we never let them have a phone. We never let them have a tablet. We didn't even let them watch TV. But we didn't know they had a friend who had this. So the point is, you can do everything you can. And so part of our philosophy of parenting is we're not just trying to protect you from something. We're trying to prepare you for something, right? And so you can keep your kids in a bubble for a certain period of time, and they're protected from everything in the world. But at some point, they have to be prepared for what they're going to face.
Yeah.
And so
our boys are in a football locker room for 4 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we allowed them to have on their phone.
No, there's no setting on the iPhone for that, right?
Yes.
Or just being in a high school in general, or being at a school or being around middle school kids or whatever. So at some point, it's not about, I got to protect my kids from this, as much as I got to prepare them for this. So when this comes, they will know this is how I deal with it. And then to be able to have open and honest conversations about what happens through this.
And I think everybody has to decide what age that is for your child.
And every kid will be different.
And every kid is different. But I really think that kids that have iPhones in elementary school, I do not agree with that. I mean, just
unlimited access to devices.
Unlimited access.
Oh my gosh.
No. Even middle school can be pretty scary.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and that is kind of a time where I think most parents start giving phones because they stay after and they need to be picked up from practice, and sometimes coaches don't let them out right at 5:30. It's like, so they want to be able to communicate. I get that. So just know your child, know what you're trying to do, and give grace when they do mess up, but also know that they're going to mess up.
Well, I would say, I don't know. I mean, for the people who are like, we're not giving our kids any access at all, that's up to you, right? Yeah. And I'm not going to criticize that one way or the other. But for the people who are like, I'm giving my kid unlimited access, I'm not going to say that's up to you. I think that's wrong. I think that's bad. I think that's a terrible idea. And, I'll go back to one of my pet peeves is like, families don't even talk anymore when they're sitting around a table or when they're out in public. And you just see these kids just walk in and everybody's got something. Everybody's staring or playing a game. We don't even know. We do not even know what we're going to reap down the road for kids that have never had to interact with anybody, that have always just been able to stare at a screen, that have always been entertained. Like, we don't even know the things that are going to come as a result of that.
And this is one thing that maybe we could talk about, and then we'll go on to our next subject.
Since you love this topic so much.
I know. Well, I think that kids that have unlimited internet access, when they get to a certain age, especially middle school, and it can be girls or it can be boys, you're awkward in middle school. Like, everything's awkward. It's supposed to be. But they will go online and start trying to research these things. Well, it's kind of like navigating them towards certain subject matter.
Right.
And then they get very confused, thinking they're not who God hasn't created them to be, who they are. Mm-hmm. And they start thinking they're something that they weren't born to be. And it just gets very confusing when the internet is educating your child.
And you can go out there and find that anywhere.
Yes.
You can find all kinds of encouragement to act a certain way, to
yeah.
live a certain way, to reject God's standards.
So,
and so let's just put a bow on this. We don't have it figured out, which is what we've said the entire time when it comes to parenting.
Yes.
We're kind of
this is really where we don't have it
We're
figured
fellow
out.
strugglers on the journey.
Yes.
But we also know, and you can notice when your kid is getting too wrapped up in screen time as a whole.
Yeah.
And we have said, hey, by the way, this is mine. I'm going to take this, and we're gonna kind of re-engage with like real things and people and that sort of stuff. Let's go outside. Let's throw a ball, paint a picture, do a project. And so we reserve the right at any time to kind of say, oh, we're gonna back this up a little bit, because
we reserve the right to check phones at any time too.
And the moment, like if you've got a 10-year-old and the moment they walk in the house, it's boom, straight to the room. Where's my iPad? Like, wait a second. Like, this is not how we're supposed to live. And 10-year-olds aren't, like, you can't expect a 10-year-old to know self-control and all that kind of stuff like that. You got to help with that. So, fellow strugglers on the journey.
Yes.
And we're learning as we go.
But I also think that too, I'm going to untie your bow just a little bit. I think that children and teenagers get a bad rap about phones, where adults are just as bad.
Oh, my goodness.
And maybe the reason why the kids are on the phone is because the adults are on the phone. And not to throw shade on any generation, but if you look at the statistics, boomers are just as bad as babies.
They are.
Like,
they're just on Facebook and not Instagram.
Yes, they're all on Facebook. And
FoxNews.com.
But they, they're on their phones just as much as like teenagers
no
are.
Doubt.
But they're using it very differently because they're in a different stage of life. And so I think if everybody would just put their phone down some and communicate again, it would be better.
Yeah, I don't know if you're an adult and you don't check your screen time. I'd encourage you to do that. I check mine about every day, every week, because I don't know, this year especially, just like, I'm going to be off my phone. So I don't want to be that dad that the kids one day are like, well, I tried to talk to him, but he was always staring at his phone. Back in the day, it could have been I tried to talk to my dad, but he always looked at the newspaper, or the news was always on TV.
My dad was at home.
Or whatever. But I would much rather be present.
My phone today's on all the time.
Be present.
I'm just like, it's always on. I don't think I ever on.
All right, you want to finish? All right, finish this
so,
topic. Go on to something else. What's up?
So I guess the other thing we were going to talk about today more so was, what do you do when your kid does mess up, either on their phone or in life? And let's say it's somewhat of a big thing, and you need some correcting. It can be a small thing, or it can maybe just a character trait that you don't like. So what have we done? I mean, we've had to do this with all of them.
At every stage.
Yes, and different stages. What do we do, or what do I do, that you kind of go along with it because you're like, that's a great idea. To help bring back the relationship. Restore the relationship.
And that's the big thing. Remember, rules without relationship will always lead to rebellion. But I think when they were little, we would actually look at them and say, we're having some problems with obedience and disrespect. So we are in a mode called boot camp. And
this is what you always called it. We're going back to boot camp.
We're going to boot camp. What did you call it?
I mean, I called it boot camp too.
So it was more like, so a lot of times we would show grace and mercy. Boot camp, there was no room for grace or mercy when it came to boot camp. Everything must be obeyed immediately with a happy heart. There were never any questions. There were never, I mean, it was
swift punishment.
Swift and immediate punishment. And because it was like hey, we've got to train these kids for the purpose of godliness. And so when they were little, it was like, hey, we're going to have boot camp, and this is what it's going to look like. When they get a little bit older, you discipline and correct in different ways. And so, sometimes it's much more of a, hey, it's a conversation, here's how we feel things are going. Here's the situation. This is what's going to happen as a result. If you've got a kid that messes up, if you've got a kid that, well,
we've had kids that didn't understand how to sweep. So it became their permanent job to learn how to sweep.
Or the boys would try to act like they're very bad at doing dishes so they never have to do dishes. And so I've always said, the kids of ours that might actually, and so I've said, so you want to act like you're bad at this so you don't have to do it. That means you get to do it all the time. That means you have more experience, right?
Yes, so they would learn how to do it.
They would learn how to do it a little bit better.
They would learn how to do it.
We have done
our boys, though, do know how to cut grass. They do know how to take care of the yard.
They know how to work hard outside.
They do, for sure.
And they know how to do dishes and laundry and all those kind of things, too. And the girls help with cutting grass or weed eating and know how to do all those things as well. But you don't let them do laundry enough. I think they ought to do their own laundry. And you're like, I like doing laundry. I don't understand it. So, I don't mind pressing the buttons to make the laundry happen, but it's the folding afterwards. And I'm like, that's terrible.
So I saw this concept when the kids were younger. I don't even remember when, but it was called tomato staking. And the whole principle behind it is, tomato vines will simply just be messy and wild without any type of staking, trying to make them grow a certain way. And if you let them grow, along the ground, they get disease and they'll rot and they'll just take it'll just be a mess. And then how do you make that grow to a fruitful plant? And I found this lady, and she was just so great about how when her kids would mess up, she would call it tomato staking. She would bring them right back to her, and they would be, quote unquote, staked right beside her. So she could quickly stop whatever negative behavior that was happening. She could quickly stop it, correct it, and then get right. And this was something I did a lot, because if I didn't like a behavior, you had to stay with me a lot. You couldn't go to your room and play. You couldn't go outside and play. You had to stay right beside mommy until you figured out how to act. And I just thought that was a great way to, I guess, a word picture of parenting. They're going to grow better beside you if you can stop and pull the weeds as quickly.
Yeah.
Versus having to weed them 5 or 6 years down the road. If you're weeding quickly, and you're going to get a better plant.
Tomatoes are going to grow up a trellis, right?
Yeah.
That's why you put the trellis in there. And you're right. If they grow wild, if you got feral children, right? There's never going to be any kind of fruit, and they're just going to go wherever they want. And it's going to lead to some really awful things, I think. So boot camp is basically tomato staking in a way.
Yes.
But you would do that in a little bit of a different way too. We would just kind of, it was almost like we'd circle the wagons. All right, we're having some problems.
Yeah.
This is who we are. These are our values. This is what we're going to be. And I think even in the tomato staking thing, she talks about some of those wild branches that'll go out every once in a while. And so there has to be some pruning. Hey, I can remember these this is a friend right now that I don't like the way you behave after you spent time with this friend. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the rules and regulations at their home and what it's like when you're there, but we're not going to hang out with this friend for a little while, because when you come back, you act in an inappropriate way. Sometimes you got to clip the vines that are growing wild. Yeah. And and then say, and you better not be that type of friend to anybody else. Your friends, when they go home, they ought to be better than,
Right.
They ought to be well behaved.
Yes. And if I look at you and tell you that it's probably a bad friend, it's probably because it's a bad friend.
That's right. They, at some point now, some of them are a little bit older and actually they call and ask for advice and things like that instead of like, I don't think we've ever, let me say this, we've never gone through the visible stage of my parents are idiots, because we probably wouldn't put up with that from our children. But for the most part, I think even our teenagers, at least the older ones, will kind of come to us for advice and ask us questions and things like that. And I think part of that is a result of kind of putting the stakes in at an early age and kind of trying to train them in the right direction. And yes, you still have to clip some wild branches from time to time and some offshoots that might be going in the wrong direction. But for the most part, hopefully they're growing up around that trellis that we built through the years.
Well, and then when we've had a couple instances where kids have just, in my mind, just went off the rails and act real stupid, and we took everything away. Everything. Yes. You could barely breathe.
Well, let's define everything. So door comes off the hinges.
Door.
You don't even have privacy in your own room.
No, you don't.
You don't have any kind of communication with the outside world.
No,
you're not driving. Are your people. You're not driving right now if you can drive. You don't have a phone. You don't have a phone. You're lucky if you get to communicate with your siblings. And you get a book. You can read a book, but most of those books are going to be, centered on godliness and faithfulness and those sorts of things, and like trying to teach them to do right.
But then you slowly can earn,
once you see the heart change.
Yes, you can regain that. So in boot camp, what do? They take away everything that first week.
Yes.
Take away everything, and you slowly over the next 6 weeks
regain some privileges.
And then that is your hope, that you regain some privileges through trust, through truth, and at the end, you're better than you were when you started. If not, we can start over.
Oh, we will.
Just like in boot camp, if you're bad on like week 3, you go back to week 1, right?
Well, the hard part is this is one of those things that can harden your child's heart or can break their heart. Mm-hmm. And you have to be in tune. Like if you don't know your kid's heart, you're in a dangerous place already. So you got to be in tune. Is their heart broken? Is there genuine conviction through this, right? Is there genuine repentance? Or is it, well, I'm just going to go through the motions so I can get my stuff back, right? And so we have to have those kind of conversations and those kind of, let's sit down and pray through this. Let's talk about this, those sorts of things. And so I think ultimately boot camp looks different now than it did when they were little, but I think we still have our own tomato staking boot camp kind of situation from time to time. And it does involve removing a lot of things that they might view as privileges. And, they get a lot of freedom when they can start driving and those sorts of things. When you start taking that freedom away, they feel it. But some people say, some people don't change until they feel the heat, not just when they see the light. So sometimes you have to make them see the light and feel the heat at the same time.
Yeah.
Yep. So, sadly, I have no rapid-fire questions for you today.
I don't either.
And you have no rapid-fire questions for me. But next episode, we are returning.
All right.
To the rapid-fire questions from me to you.
All right. Well,
backed by popular demand. Popular demand.
Nobody cares that
All
much.
right. Thanks so much for joining. Everybody cares. Thanks for joining us for the On Second Thought podcast today. God bless you guys. As always, if you have any questions, you can find us at secondfamily.church/thoughts. Leave your comments and questions and compliments for Miss Stephanie.
It is so hot in this closet today.
This is not a closet. You got people thinking I got you stuffed in this little bitty closet. And I want it on record that you said it was hot since you're always cold.
It's been a great day. See you next time.